So studies have shown that people are growing more and more pessimistic in general, not just about the fate of the world and civilization, but about the outcomes in their own lives. And I'm not going to sit here in this video and tell you why it's unlikely that something like climate change is just going to wipe us all out and destroy everything and make life unlivable. That's a whole nother subject. What I want to talk about is how even if the world was going to end, that does not justify like a loss of hope or a sort of like throwing up your hands and freeing yourself of all responsibility to your own future and the people around you. And here's why. First of all, even if everything went horribly wrong and there were more natural disasters and the economy tanked and all these horrible things happened, that would not really, you cannot call that the end of the world. Because let's just say that if that happened in the United States or Europe or any wealthy country from Singapore to even like modern China, like what that would look like is something like the poorer parts of the developing world, like say Venezuela, which was already not that rich, but then had this horrible series of disasters. But is the world over in Venezuela? Or are there still millions and millions of people there working jobs, falling in love, having children, etc., etc.? All those disasters did not free them from like a need for hope, a need to believe in the future, a need to struggle, a need to survive, a need to work. It did also certainly not strip their lives of meaning. And here's the funny thing, is the people that think the end of the world and all these disasters means that they should be doom and gloom about their own lives and feel sad and feel like giving up. They also are people that say, well, maybe life would be better if we went back to the basics and lived in cabins or lived in medieval villages or lived as like tribal people do. But here's the thing, like what they're kind of implicitly stating there is the end of the world might make life more meaningful, because then it wouldn't just be you mindlessly scrolling on the internet, working a job you don't like and engaging in modern drudgery. You would have to go chop firewood, you would have to hunt. Your life would be inherently meaningful because of all those demands and difficulties that the end of the world would bring with it. And here's the thing too, if you're reading a novel about the apocalypse, do you root for those characters to give up? Do you ever watch a movie about characters struggling? Whether it's Lord of the Rings or even like The Road, where they're literally in the end of the modern world, do you ever think, man, these characters are so stupid for trying. Why don't they just lay down and die? No, we as human beings never, ever, ever want to see that. We want to see aesthetically and emotionally people go to the very bitter end as best they can. So why would it not be the same for you, even if every single one of your worst nightmares on the global and micro scale are about to come true? This is why pessimism is just completely useless. We don't like it in other people. We don't like it in stories and characters. Why do we do it to ourselves? Why do we say, well, I think it's likely things will go badly, so therefore I'm going to change my behavior now, and also, more importantly, change my emotional state and adjust for a possible negative future, and not necessarily prepare intelligently, because that's the thing. It's not like these people that think everything is going horribly and like America is going to fall apart or whatever their specific belief is. It's not like they just stock up, prepare for that eventuality, and then emotionally adjust and get on with their lives. No, what they do is they ruminate and linger over the negative possibilities, and they probably don't even prepare because they're just so depressed. In a sense, they're almost addicted to this negative emotional state. But there's no utility in that. We don't admire it. We don't like it really in ourselves. It's just something we fall into. I think primarily because I have fallen victim to this so many times. I am a natural pessimist. I see the worst in everything. A huge part of me, especially a few years ago, for a really long time felt that way, that like everything was going to fall apart. There's nothing holding the world up, that everything is in a process of decay, just that horrible sort of depressive, pessimistic thinking. That used to be me, for sure. But what are the benefits of thinking like that? And the benefits are, it frees you from so much responsibility. You feel emotionally justified in laying in bed all day and not forming new relationships and not taking risks and not expending lots and lots of energy to try to make your environment better, to try to build a community around yourself, to pick up litter, to plant a garden, to do anything. And I like to speak practically, because that's the thing. Even if the world is going to end in 5 years, would establishing a community garden in your neighborhood not be a good idea? Just because it's going to be wiped out in 5 years? That's a very serious question we should all ask ourselves. And maybe it sounds a bit trite, community garden, oh, how nice. But it's just a good example of the kind of thing you could do that takes a lot of energy and might fail and might demand a lot of you and might, in a certain way of thinking, not be meaningful or important in the grand scheme of things. Because as much as this corresponds to people who think just like modern civilization is going in a bad direction, it also corresponds to people who say, well, the universe is going to end and we're all going to be turned into dust, so what does any of it matter? And I just find it strange that there's like this implicit belief based on nothing that says like, if something ends, things that came before that ending have no meaning. Why should that be the case? Every novel you've read has ended. Every movie you've watched has ended. Does that mean that what came before that end doesn't matter? Of course not. Just everything has to end. I mean, that's kind of a established law in our universe. But this idea that like something ending or being obliterated means that it had no meaning prior to that in time, that is a human invention. That is a human emotional trap, basically. That it makes everything sad and terrible. It means that the spider in your room doesn't have any meaning in its life. That it's just completely meaningless. There's no beauty in it. There's no like living quality that justifies it in itself. It's like, oh, well, the spider's gonna die and the spider's not famous and the spider doesn't affect anything, so why does it matter? If you think like that, it becomes impossible to live, basically. So really consider why you might be pessimistic, what you might be getting out of being pessimistic, how it affects your behavior and saves you energy and saves you emotional effort. It's emotionally painful, but being pessimistic takes less emotional effort than being positive and self-directed and pro-social and like developing yourself and the people around you. That's all.